So I'd been toying around with the idea of going back since 2002. So by the time I was going in 2013, I was all in. I didn't leave anything uh, behind to tie me to coming back. I gave away or sold anything I could give away. The rest was put in a container, and it was a one-way trip. And my thinking was, alas, we're done. We are settling in, and we're going to make the best of it. So at that time, yes, it was an idea of going back. And then slowly, the reality of how misleading that concept is after being so removed from everyday life, working life, family life, the whole 9 yards. That became more and more of a reality of, yeah. First of all, the whole idea of going to Kenya should be one you evaluate as you would anything else in life, whether that's an investment, whether that's a spouse, family life, where you're going to buy a house, the whole 9 yards. It needs to be a realistic approach. At that time, the environment and the reality that hit me and the things I had to deal with, whether it's school fees, rent, trying to, I don't know, get some gainful employment or whatever, all that was a bit much. And I honestly gave it my best in terms of not even thinking that I still had an American passport and I can come back at any time.
For many in the diaspora, the idea of going back home feels like a return, but what if it's actually a second immigration that most people are completely unprepared for? From illusions of a dollar advantage to hidden rules of survival and the quiet struggles people don't talk about. Tonight, we break down what really determines whether you thrive or fail when you go back home, and why so many diasporans realize the challenge only when it's too late. Now, joining us in a minute is Kimani, a reverse diaspora returnee from Arizona who moved back to Kenya after 22 years in the US. He spent over 5 years on the ground and then quietly made his way back to the US under circumstances that left many with more questions than answers. His viral call on this show 2 weeks ago shook timelines as he challenged the idea of going back home, arguing that many diasporans are not returning but stepping into a system that they don't fully understand. So tonight we go deeper trying to understand if Kimani is describing a harsh truth that many are afraid to admit, or if this is an outlier experience shaped by his own personal journey. But the bigger question tonight is, are you ready to hear the truth, or will you keep holding on to the romantic fantasy of village sunsets and the dollar privilege? So if you've ever thought about moving back to Kenya, or believe you already understand how things there work, this episode might completely disrupt how you think. So without much further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please drop an emoji in the comment section and help me in welcoming the mysterious, the bold, and the unapologetic Kimani, all the way from Scottsdale, Arizona. Kimani, karibu sana to the One Mic Show. It's great having you as a guest. How are you feeling?
Cheers, man.
Okay. All right,
Living the
good.
life.
Okay, good. Now, how has life been for you since that viral call you made on the One Mic Show 2 weeks ago? Kimani.
That call, you know, it was a knee-jerk reaction of listening to your previous few weeks of shows plus that one when we kept talking about going back. And that word going back just kept coming and bothering me. I said, I gotta call and kind of put this myth to the side. So I called, and since then, there's been a lot of follow-up conversations on that concept. A lot of some guys who went through similar experiences, some who are still thriving. And so, for some reason, it became a very hot topic. So, glad to elaborate further.
Okay, but what is it that bothered you about that word going back? What exactly bothered you that prompted you to give us a call?
The unpreparedness of what the idea of going back is. Um, I think going back means something, returning to a familiar situation, familiar ground, familiar relationship. You're going back. Kenya, after 22 years being away, I learned is not a question of going back. There's just so much that you've lost in 22 years that it's a false belief to think you're going back. You would be better prepared if you said, I'm going to Kenya. That way, mentally, you're kind of on your toes. Whatever comes, you'll adjust. But when you go say you're going back, you have a false comfort, and then the shock in the system hits you, and that's when you start realizing, oh, this is not the Kenya I knew.
Okay, now, before I introduce the panel, there were so many reactions that followed that were even very unexpected and shocking for us. What is it that shocked you the most about the reactions, that you got when the video of yours we posted on YouTube, like it went viral and everyone was calling everywhere? What shocked you the most about some of the reactions that you came across?
The reactions were very honest, and I think to a lot of people, there's been a desire to put the record straight, and for whatever reason, they haven't done so. And so when I said what I said, there was a lot of people who said, "Yeah, dude, spot on. I mean, you nailed it," and that's an experience that many people have. But then there was also one comment I saw that kind of cracked me up and said, I'm probably a person who's used to the easy life and mwanaume ni effort.
Okay.
That's one thing you hear a lot when you're in Kenya. Mwanaume ni effort.
Okay.
You make it happen and you move on. And I agree with that. There's nothing that can't be achieved. There's nothing that can't be done. It's an economy that can offer lots of possibilities. But I think the challenges come when you mix other things into what is you're involved with, whether it's family, whether it's city lifestyle, whether it's aging parents. All these things kind of play a role, and then kind of they set your priorities.
Okay, thank you so much. And we're going to come back to you, Kimani. But in a quick minute right now, I want to, get to the panel. Before we get to the panel, I can see Victor Oma is already tuned in on YouTube. Victor Oma, you're the one who started this all the way from Toronto, Canada. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Asema, hi, guys. And let us know what you think in the comments, what questions you want us to ask Kimani tonight. Feel free to type in the comments. This is a Fungua Roho session, and this is the People's Kamkunji. So on to the panel. I'm going to start with DJ Omosh Fire right here beside me. In a quick minute, Omosh, what caught your attention from Kimani's live call on the show 2 weeks ago when we were on the phone, just when he was talking? What is it that caught your attention the most? DJ Omosh Fire, karibu sana.
Asante sana. Thank you, Ali. Thanks, Kimani, for gracing us with your presence. Thanks for coming back to face the People's Kamkunji and the fire that is the Kamkunji. So, on that call, I think, to be honest, Ali, I was still, I don't know if I'm saying I was in shock or I was still absorbing the information. It was a lot that was unpacked in, I think, was it a 22 minutes?
22 minutes.
That call was 22 minutes.
It was only 20. It was actually less than 22 minutes. I think it was 20 because the full video was 25 minutes. There was an intro and then there was the exhaling after the conversation because it hit us like, hit us hard.
Kwani tulikuwa tumelala.
It hit us like kokoto.
So the different aspects, there were so many places that he went, dealing with Famo, dealing with Jobo, reality ya life, soft life, landing, and then ile pap, job, gone, now, G, sort. And then you begin, I guess, phase 2 of life, as you know or didn't know it. And then you're trying to adjust and trying to come up and also make sense of what's going. There was a whole lot of things that were going on. But I think to me also the other one thing that did stand out was he was not saying, don't go back home, just go back home with your antennas on. Make sure that kuna blinders kama zile za race horses, and make sure that you adjust, prepare, and again adjust.
Okay.
And kuna kakitu alisema siji honeymoon
honeymoon face.
Iyo.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting that people had different things. I mean, for me, from what I heard, and I've listened to that call like 17 times, and I'm not even making this up. What I got is that Kimani was saying, I went through a dark alley at a certain bad time, and I got mugged. But if you have to go through that alley, here are the rules if you do not want to get mugged. But all that people had is do not go completely through that alley, even if it's the route to your home. So I think different people had different things. So today we are out here to break down everything. Let me go to Mika Och. And Mika, in a quick minute, what caught your attention from Kimani's live call on the show 2 weeks ago? Mika.
There's something that is usually said that there's nobody who can tell your story better than yourself. And the rawness in which he spoke and how he explained things, it wasn't a thing of speculations. It was to the point right now, this is what I know will never allow me. I will never think to go back because of A, B, C, D. This is, I went, this is what I did, this is how it happened, and this is how things come back, right? So there's that you can hear in it and you can understand. And as you said, Ali, the problem with most people is that when most people find somebody who dampens their dream or their shining light, they don't want to understand why that shadow is there. They start fighting it. So most people understand, like he said, don't go. He did say, don't go. He said, I went. This is what I experienced. You can either learn from my experience or you can go the way you want to go. The choice is yours. But he spoke his experience.
Okay.
Back to you, Ali.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mika. We already have a caller. Calls are coming in early. So caller, be patient. We want to go to the first question and then we are going to reach out to you. And Karibu Sana Atieno Jimbo here on Facebook saying, is asking a question, if going back after 22 years, were there visits between the 22 years? If it's the latter, then there's no issue with using the phrase going back. And we're going to get back to Kimani with that. And also another question from Washeke. What are the 5 major blind spots? Wow, 5. Yani Washeke akona mpaka number. What are the 5 major blind spots diasporans have when it relates to moving back to Kenya? We are gonna get to that part, Washeke. But I also want to welcome Mubelwa Bandio, our regular fundi wa mitambo Uno Mike is missing in action, so Mubelwa is in place. Bila
permission.
Yes, and Mubelwa, of course, has been in the middle of this conversation, has listened to it keenly multiple times. So Mubelwa, karibu sana. From what you listened and your experience nchini Tanzania, is it the same experiences ama uligongwa na kitu ambacho hujawahi kusikia before? Karibu sana Mubelwa.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Kimani, for this. It's the same experience, pretty much. I think it was 3 years ago. I went back home and I met this guy who is he's doing pretty well. He's a business person and then turned politician, and now it's like a regional commissioner back home, right? Mm-hmm. And when we're having a conversation about moving back or going to invest, and he's like, if you want to do that, make sure you do it now. Don't wait until everybody else in your network has retired, And that's another thing. So come now if you want to do it while you still have a chance to try, do try and error. Or, take a risk. And I think during that conversation, we were talking about people who seem to do well or at least accept the situation, and those who cannot come back, whether they were deported or something. That's the level of risk they are willing to take. When you know that you have to fight, it's like there's no turning back. It's pretty much like climbing a tree knowing that you don't have harness. Yeah. You're more careful doing that than when you know that, you're strapped and everything. So it's almost the same experience. Going back, I'm not sure if I'll get into the debate of whether I'll call that going back or just visiting, but it's totally different. And it's different. I think those who went between, let's say, 1990s to 2010, maybe up to 2015, the change was not as rapid as it is now. If you were home three years ago, going back right now, it's like everything has changed, right? Mm-hmm. And with East African countries, unfortunately, not right now, we are into deeper shitstorm of governance or development than ever before. And we are not into what you can. It's not about what you can do. It's not about your brain experience, expertise, whatever. It's who knows who, You can take everything. Now you're out in Tanzania. Right?
Okay, I was about to ask.
Yes,
Kama
even in
TZ.
TZ. Oh, yeah, big time right now. Okay. So success is not only on efforts and everything. It's more about networking and actually, I would say illegal networking. Not legal
Illegal networking.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
Si hata America, sinaona hadi
Yeah.
na kazi.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Sawa sawa. I know we already have a caller, but we're gonna be releasing the number a bit later on. We're gonna give you a chance, caller. But real quick, before we go back to Kimani, a number of comments here have been coming in. I can see Hanigal Njeri on YouTube. Karibu sana. Anasema hi gents. And Victor Oma is asking, when is Mika coming to the studio live? Very good question. Hiyo hapo
yuko
tutadiscuss
hapa
baadaye.
jibu live.
Yes, and then Hanigal Njeri anasema one mic amemaliza sick time by now, tumweke PIP. I agree kabisa with Hanigal Njeri. He needs to start paying the company for this extra sick time that he's taking. And then G3954 anasema when he said he is not going back to Kenya, I can say colonization is complete to him and the others who say they will never go back.
Wow,
and then
that's a little strong.
and then hapa Hosilando anasema great perspective Bandio. Thank you so much. Again, you're tuned into the One Mic Show, and we have Kimani. The mystery is broken. He's live with us tonight, and we will be talking about the live call that he made last week that shook timelines. Now, Kimani, I want to come back to you, and this is also going to relate a little bit to Asheke's question that about blind spots, but before that, or rather Atieno Jimbo's questions about whether you are going back and forth within those 22 years that you were in the US before you finally moved to Kenya. But after 22 years in the US, Kimani, when you made that move in 2013, did it actually feel like you were going back home? And I know this again is now go back there, now in hindsight. Because remember last week you said you wish the One Mic Show was there in 2013. So when you were going in 2013, did it feel like going back home? Kimani?
Yeah. First part of the question. Yes, I was going back. Maybe not as often as I would have liked. I came in 91. I was home in 2001, 2002, and 2009. So there was going back and forth for various reasons here and there. And so in going back in 2013, in my mind, I was going back. And this is something I'd been toying around with since about 2002. I had tried to get into one of those interviews. I think the firm was called Careers in Africa. They used to have interviews in London and other places for multinationals looking to send guys back home. So I'd been toying around with the idea of going back since 2002. So by the time I was going in 2013, I was all in. I didn't leave anything behind to tie me to coming back. I gave away or sold anything I could give away. The rest was put in a container, and it was a one-way trip. And my thinking was, alas, we're done. We are settling in, and we're going to make the best of it. So at that time, yes, it was an idea of going back. And then slowly, the reality of how misleading that concept is after being so removed from everyday life, working life, family life, the whole 9 yards. That became more and more of a reality of, yeah, you are definitely not prepared for this.
Now, I think one of the things that triggered people the most is when you say that, you no longer have a desire to go back to Kenya. And of course, this is your experience and your story. Someone here is even saying, when he said he's not going back to Kenya, I can say colonization is complete to him, and others who say they will never go back. And you further said that to you going to Kenya feels like going to Fiji or Vietnam or Dubai. It's a foreign place. Maybe talk a little bit about that so that people can understand where you're coming from, because I was triggered too. Unajua mi bado niko romantic face. So I was a bit triggered too when you said that.
Uko honeymoon ama romantic?
No, I'm not honeymoon. Bado sijafika. I'm still in the romantic phase.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Kimani.
The reality of Kenya kind of, let's put it this way. First of all, the whole idea of going to Kenya should be one you evaluate as you would anything else in life, whether that's an investment, whether that's a spouse, family life, where you're going to buy a house, the whole nine yards. It needs to be a realistic approach, not a romantic idea or nostalgia of this is where I was born, this is where I grew up, I love Kenya, yeah, I'm gonna go. Yeah, that is very misleading because you will make very bad judgment errors because you're not really thinking with your full head. You've got some emotion tied to it, and that's never a good deal. You almost have to remove the emotion out of it as you consider going back. So then we get to the question of how do I look at going back or relocating there? At the time I moved there, my kids were 2.5 and 4.5. At that time, the environment and the reality that hit me and the things I had to deal with, whether it's school fees, rent, trying to, I don't know, get some gainful employment or whatever, all that was a bit much. And I honestly gave it my best in terms of not even thinking that I still had an American passport and I can come back at any time. Like I said, to me, going was a one-way process and I never expected to come back. But the reality of it changed things for me in terms of what it is I would like to go through ever again. It's like going to a restaurant, I guess. You know, you go to a restaurant, you had a bad experience, you waited too long, the food came, it was not as good as you thought it would be, it was expensive. The bad experience leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and maybe you're not likely to go back to that restaurant. Who knows? Down the road, there's a change in management. Maybe you hear some interesting reviews. You'll try it again. Kenya, I would still do again. Definitely not as a family man. Now we can talk about post-retirement, and I'm not looking to make a living. I'm not trying to make income. All my income or investments or whatever is based elsewhere, and I can just go as a tourist. It's a hell of a place as a tourist. It's a hard place to live when you have to pay that rent, when you have to pay school fees, etc. Because the reality of Kenya is that some costs are constant. That fees will have to be paid or your kid is home. The rent, the water, the whatever. But on the other side of that equation, the income side is always delayed. One is immediate at the end of the month, the other is delayed. And that gap, filling that gap, will take a lot out of you. So that was my experience with that process. In years to come, like I said, when I'm a retired guy, I could choose to call that home. But for now, I enjoy going places. I travel. If I was to evaluate someone going on vacation, going to Kenya is just as similar as going to Fiji or Hawaii or wherever. I say, it's not an emotional decision for me anymore. I don't do the annual visit or whatever. The last time I was there was 2019. And the next time I'll likely be there is, I don't know, maybe in 2 years.
It's okay. We'll
Okay.
welcome you to Rusinga.
Okay, sawa. Now before we go to the caller, be patient. We're gonna get to you. Kimani, do you think diasporans underestimate how much they've changed or how much Kenya has changed whenever they're making these decisions? Now, just in hindsight, looking at your situation and what you're hearing currently, Kimani.
Definitely, we underestimate so much. I remember in the early 2000s, there was still a strong push for multinationals to hire guys in the diaspora and come back and work in Africa. And it was supposed to be a very fitting win-win situation for multinationals and folks going back home. That thinking changed over time since the early 2000s. I spoke to a guy at Ernst & Young, who was a senior recruiter, and he said companies ended up investing so much in people coming back. They would move you, they'll hire you, they'll pay you more, they'll be this. But then you come and, 6 months later, you guys have decided to go back to wherever you were abroad because, the potholes, the water, the unreliable electricity, lifestyle was just too much. And the companies weren't getting, bang for their buck. So they started shifting their thinking towards more local folks. And the universities were graduating a lot more people than when I was done in high school. There was a lot more kids graduating and very smart kids and very capable guys. So then that whole idea of getting that guy who's going to come and say 6 months later, nimechoka, the mindset shifted. So it was a shock to me that that was so pronounced because you coming in from abroad, you are the underdog. The likelihood that you are going to be picked for any position was unlikely.
Yeah.
And that was shocking. That was shocking.
Okay.